So we know, for example, that a lot more languages are going to become endangered and potentially die out. We know that that's happening. We also know that people are going to continue to use artificial intelligence more and more over the 50 years. And we also know that patterns of migration are going to change. So that's three really big changes that are going to happen over the next 50 years. And I think language is entwined in all of them. So obviously, the first thing, we all have a mother tongue. Most of us have lots of mother tongues, more than one mother tongue. But a lot of those mother tongues are being lost. And as linguists, that's something we should deeply care about. But as people, that's something we should really care about. So that's a culture and history of people.
Welcome to PPLS Perspectives, a podcast bringing students and academics together to explore the research carried out by the University of Edinburgh School of Philosophy, Psychology and Language Sciences and the impact this work has on society.
Hello and welcome to PPLS Perspectives. This is a podcast where we highlight ongoing research in the School of Philosophy, Psychology and Language Sciences at the University of Edinburgh. I will be your host today. My name is Maisie Hallam. I'm a final year PhD student in the Centre for Language Evolution at Edinburgh, and you may know me from my previous podcasting accolades, such as my PPLS Perspectives episode with Kenny Smith last year.
Who doesn't know it?
I think everybody's listened to that one, in my doctoral research, I'm looking at kinship terminology systems, so how words for family members differ across the world's languages, and how similarities and differences between languages reflect pressures imposed on language by human minds. But today, I'm not talking about that. I'm joined today by Jenny Culbertson, Professor Jenny Culbertson from the Centre for Language Evolution as well, and we are going to talk a little bit about Jenny's research program, which has to do with how shared patterns across the world's languages are shaped by the human mind, and experimental methods and computational methods used to test hypotheses about how those patterns are shaped by the human mind. But we will hear more from her in a moment. We're actually going to be talking more about a presentation she gave recently at would you remind me the name of the conference, Jenny?
Yes, it was a summit put on by the Geneva Science and Diplomacy Anticipator, which is a think tank in Geneva.
And we're going to be hearing about how language is going to change the future, or technological innovations to do with language and the future. So in this podcast, we will take a whistle-stop tour of Jenny's ideas that she shared at this summit. We've got 5 questions, we've got 20 minutes, and we'll start with a classic for this podcast, which is the elevator pitch. So in this case, Jenny, could you elevator pitch the talk that you gave at the summit?
Oh, yeah, I can. Okay, so the talk was almost an elevator pitch anyway. So I really wanted to frame it in terms of changes that we know are happening in the next, say, 50 years. So we know, for example, that a lot more languages are going to become endangered and potentially die out. We know that that's happening. We also know that people are going to continue to use artificial intelligence more and more over the 50 years. And we also know that patterns of migration are going to change. So that's 3 really big changes that are going to happen over the next 50 years. And I think language is entwined in all of them. So obviously, the first thing, we all have a mother tongue. Most of us have lots of mother tongues, more than one mother tongue. But a lot of those mother tongues are being lost. And as linguists, that's something we should deeply care about. But as people, that's something we should really care about. So that's a culture and history of people. So I talked a bit in this talk at the summit just about how we can try to counteract that. And one way we can potentially try to counteract that, if we play our cards right, is to use the development of new technological tools to do that. So I think AI companies have a role to play if they want to play it. In helping communities to preserve their languages. But at the same time, I think, we all can already kind of recognize when something sounds like it was generated by a chatbot. We are going to continue to be interacting more with AI, whether we kind of like it or not. And we don't really understand how that's going to impact human language. So I think one of the exciting but kind of scary things that's going to happen in the next 10 years is we will understand a lot more about what's the impact on human language and communication of having those tools around. Um, and in terms of migration, to me, this comes back to the idea that we should be embracing multilingualism. Um, and I think, science has made some advances in understanding how brains deal with multiple languages. And I think, again, we will know more about what the potential benefits are, the complete lack of drawbacks, and just how we can kind of, as societies, better appreciate multilingualism and open ourselves up to that. The last thing I talked about at this summit was actually animal communication. So, as a proud member of the Center for Language Evolution, I'm obviously very interested in that. And although I think, when you go to a talk about language and you're a member of the public, you don't necessarily expect to be hearing about animal communication. I think a lot of exciting technological advances are happening in our understanding of those systems too. So we have a lot better data than we had. We're going to continue to have a lot more data, and that data allows us to use some of the cool technological tools that have been developed for human language to better understand the kind of structural properties and even meanings of animal communication systems. So I didn't necessarily predict that we're going to talk to our dogs, but I also didn't not predict that.
I think that's what people really
I
want to
think
hear
that is
about.
what people want.
I mean, you don't have to convince me that all of these things about language are true and that the world is changing and all of these exciting technological advancements will enhance our understanding of how language works, where language comes from, socially will enhance people's lives if they have access to, for example, education in their native language.
That's right.
And
yep, exactly.
And yeah, you kind of covered why these things are important already. I wonder, maybe could we talk a bit more about your predictions for how we might be able to use AI, generative AI, large language models for good in our pursuit of those goals?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing to do is to start thinking now, or probably we should have done a better job of thinking 5 years ago about how to make these systems and keep these systems more open so that they're actually accessible to different communities. So right now, if you live in a rich country that has access to AI tools, you have them, and if you don't, you don't. So one thing is just like understanding more about the impacts of unequal access. So that is something that this organization GESTA is super interested in. So they've been trying to do this for quantum computing already. So quantum computing kind of doesn't really exist yet, exactly.
Only in the minds of
exactly. So like now is a good time already to start thinking about, okay, what happens when that does exist? Like how can we make sure that people have access to it? And that is a question we could have done a better job of asking around around AI and large language models. Yeah, so that's just like, that has nothing to do with, like, it's not about language specifically, but it is about access to these tools. And there are companies who are developing multilingual tools. They're already out there, although to be honest, their support for lots of languages is not really that great.
Yeah, I remember a few years ago when you couldn't even speak to Siri, like Apple's Siri, in a Scottish accent and get a sensible response.
Yes, I mean now these systems are actually very good at Scottish, but it used to be a joke we always said,
and like God forbid you speak a minority language from somewhere in the world that's not a dialect of English, right? And then suddenly you find yourself very lost.
That's right, and even languages that have millions of speakers don't have good access, don't have good tools that are developed for those languages. But in principle, as these tools get better at learning from less data, I think we will be in a position to be able to try to kind of fast track preserving of languages using these tools. And we want the communities themselves to actually be able to do it. So that's why I started this off by talking about access to them. But I think as linguists, we have a role to play in trying to make good use of these technologies. So that's what I have in mind. So doing more recording and developing of speech technology tools, which is something, for example, our colleague Corin is doing. So that kind of stuff. And then just just getting the data, documenting those languages has to start out by getting some really good quality data. And then at some point, I think this technologies can help to sort of enrich the tools that those communities have.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe we could talk a bit more now about how what our job, I guess, as language researchers is in making these sorts of things happen. So
yeah,
I know you, so I know that this is not typical for your research program, these kinds of questions, but maybe you could talk a little bit about how you see the sort of work you do contributing to these kind of overarching goals, or the sort of work that maybe we do in the linguistics department at large.
Yeah, I mean, you're right to say that, maybe even 10 years ago, I wouldn't have thought of myself as a person who was particularly interested in endangered languages. Maybe that's a bit embarrassing to say, but it's probably
I think
true.
that was all of us 10 years ago.
Yeah,
in some ways.
yeah. But I think along with a lot of other people, it kind of became so untenable to be doing research only on English speakers, especially because we are interested in the Center for Language Evolution, for example. We are super interested in understanding the human mind, not English speakers' minds. And obviously, linguistics has always been interested in being cross-linguistic. But even still, there's like some popular languages to work on. So things are still skewed. But as a kind of cognitive science flavored linguist, I have been just increasingly interested in ensuring that when we seek to understand how human minds shape language, we're looking at a broader swath of human minds. And as you know, I got started working on this language, Kitaraka, spoken in Kenya, just by accident, really. It was totally an accident. It just happened to be that one of my collaborators had a PhD student from Tharaka many years ago, actually, in Tromsø. And that guy agreed to be a collaborator on a project. And when we got there, he was the president of the university, so he was a little bit busy.
Yeah.
And he basically said, okay, I have this great student. And so that student really helped us. So that's Patrick Kanampiu, who just graduated with a PhD from Edinburgh last year. So this language, Kitaraka, has really, I don't know, captured a place in my heart. I've got really interested in it for its own sake, which, like I said, is not my kind of natural. I'm not that kind of linguist usually. So, that's not doing much. It's just one language, but we're doing what we can now to think about how to promote that language in that community, because it's not endangered now, but you can kind of see the writing on the wall. And I think that's the case for a lot of languages. There's lingua francas and English and other global majority languages that are encroaching, and a language has to be passed to the next generation to stay alive, and that's a real danger for Kitaraka.
Yeah, I think it's important to get started on documenting these languages before we're actually worrying about them. That's a huge part of the problem.
Yeah,
right? We only start to kind of care when the final few speakers are dwindling. It's like, maybe if we do the work now,
yeah, that's right.
We can
that's right.
save something in the future.
And I think that's the cool part about trying to think about things, including technologies, in a kind of anticipatory way. Like, how are they gonna? Let's think about them now and try to understand what are the impacts going to be. How can we kind of plan for a better world,
where we don't have to worry about them so much.
Yeah, and we only have we're just little linguists, but
well, we have a big role to play.
We do.
I think with a big role.
Yeah, I think we really do. But I think the other thing is, like, we're sitting here in Edinburgh, and it's not my mother tongue. It's the mother tongue of this community. And so what we really want to do is get the tools in the hands of the community. So train the community to do what they would like to do with their own language. So I think that's the role that linguists have to play. Is to help train people, help ask the questions, help bring the tools to where they need to be.
Yeah, absolutely. But there are a lot of challenges associated with it, though, which I guess is why people don't really, or haven't typically, kind of considered the importance of globalizing our linguistic research.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, it is hard. Yeah, I want to talk through some of the, I guess, with your experience working with the Kitaraka speakers, what were some of the challenges involved with that you wouldn't have had if you were just focusing on English speakers?
Yeah, I mean, well, like yourself, I think, like my normal way of running experiments is to click a button on Prolific.
And run them online from
Yeah.
hundreds of people at a time.
Yeah. And, you know, back in the day, we used to run experiments on actual humans who were near us. Um, and it was a big pain.
Yeah, undergraduates usually.
Yeah, they were usually undergraduates at Edinburgh. So, you know, going back to that kind of way of gathering data is non-trivial. But it's interesting because we've actually learned a lot about how to make that process easier. So I still use all the same kind of tools that I used. Like I still use like web-based experiments for these populations. We just let them do things on their mobile phones, for example. So we don't, you know, we haven't like forgotten what we learned. When we go to another population, we can still actually use some of those kind of convenience-driven tools that we've developed. But you know, another big challenge is just so like these are people who are not necessarily used to doing an experiment. So undergrads at Edinburgh or people on Prolific, that's kind of like they know what's sort of expected of them, and that's not necessarily true of all people. You know, even here, if like I remember trying experiments with my parents who are probably have never done an experiment before, and they just sometimes it was a little odd. Their way of interpreting what they were meant to be doing was not exactly what we would have expected. So we have to be just very explicit, not about telling people what the experiment is about. That's a no, you can't do that. But just you know, the way that things have to be very clear. We have to do a lot of piloting to make sure everything works as expected. It's not a bad thing.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. I never thought about. I mean, obviously, really important to kind of be doing our research on diverse populations in terms of different language speakers. Never occurred to me that, like, you know, if we were running experiments on older people, or I guess the same issue when you run experiments with children.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
People
they
just
don't know
what they're doing.
Yeah, they don't know what you want them to do. And
yeah, to
some degree, that's a good thing. It's good to have naive participants, but to
yeah.
some degree, like sometimes they just don't react the way that you would expect, and they react in non-uniform ways. And so you really have to work hard to make your experiments exactly right.
Yeah, in some ways we've really optimized for like the 18 to 35 demographic.
Yeah, although, you know, on Prolific, it's older now than it used to be. I don't know if you look at the ages of your participants ever, but
No,
it's
rarely.
quite a spread now. It's quite a
Okay.
spread. You get 70-year-olds regularly.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's
I,
interesting.
this is a little off topic, but I remember, so Prolific is a platform where you can complete experiments online. It's where we host our experimental work, and I remember it went viral on TikTok a few years ago as a way to make like pocket money, essentially. And then it was like suddenly flooded with like 17, 18, 19-year-olds who were all completing studies in a particular way.
We're studying
and
the
we were all
human
like,
mind, Maisie.
the human mind in all its diversity. Like,
Yeah.
middle class, educated, white young
Yeah,
people who are obsessed with TikTok.
But the other thing is that this is a multilingual community. So they speak Kitharaka, but they also all speak Kiswahili. That's the lingua franca in Kenya. Many of them speak English. And for my own research, I need to think about how does a person's experience with language affect how they're going to behave in the experiment. And to some degree, when you're talking about, you know, when you're in Britain or in the US, you've got English speakers and they're often monolingual. And so you have like one language to deal with. And you can think, okay, well, how is that going to shape how participants are doing the experiment? So a lot of my experiments are about learning a piece of an artificial language, as you know. And so, you know, if people know already English, then some of that artificial language might be more similar to them, or some of it might be very different. So their own experience with English is going to shape how they learn this new language. And for Kitharaka speakers, you need to be thinking about like 3-4 different languages, and not all of them are very well documented. So we just kind of are a little bit more in the dark about how we expect their language experience to interact. And if you want monolingual speakers, it's really, really tricky to do. So I've done that for one of the experiments we all did together, and that involved Patrick going out into very rural areas where older people live who went through the education system before English was mandated in schools, and so they are actually monolingual Kitharaka speakers. But that's really hard to access, and that's the case no matter where on earth you're trying to do your like cross-cultural, cross-linguistic experimental work, you're going to struggle to find monolingual speakers. And that's a good thing. I'm not saying we don't want monolingual. People should speak the languages they want to speak. Great. But just as experimentalists, it does make it a little bit more tricky.
Yeah, in terms of controlling for the effect of English on
exactly
your outcomes. But I was thinking about this recently, actually, in terms of like, because we want so much to control the influence of external factors like people knowing English as well as another language, it means we kind of miss an important part of what it means to do language like a human, which is that sometimes people speak multiple languages. It's common not to in the UK and the US, but like most of the world is working with a cognition that is very familiar with 2, 3, maybe 4 languages, and that might affect the way that they perform in experiments as well.
I'm sure it does. So,
just another reason why more diversity makes for better science, makes for a better world.
Definitely.
Just going back to the GESDA stuff then, I quite like we've gone on a little journey here where we've sort of made an analogy between the importance of having diverse samples in science and the importance of kind of broadening diversity in technological advancements.
Yep.
But do you have any final comments then about what's the next step? What is the action that we take to work towards this better future where we care more about linguistic diversity, where we care more about how technological advancements put some people on the back burner and how we can solve that?
Well, that's a hard question.
I'm sorry,
Maisie.
Jenny, that is a hard question. I'm not the one who has to answer it, so take your time.
Yeah, I mean, I think as we were saying before, linguists have a particular role to play here. And I think we can be ambassadors in a sense. So we can be kind of conduits between, for example, people who are working on the technological side of things and, the public, people who are doing diplomacy, people who are making policy. We can try to shape the way that that people see language. So we can try to help both those groups kind of understand what's the importance of being multilingual. What's the importance of documenting these languages? What's really at stake?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the best role we have to play. Other than that, if we ourselves develop tools, then we have the power to make them accessible, and we should be keeping those things in mind. I think linguists are I think we are in a good position to share these kinds of important technologies and to help communities to make use of them. But I do think as a kind of a spokespeople for the importance of language and culture, we should be playing that role. We should be getting out there and interacting with these kind of different communities and getting outside of our own small worlds of research to do that.
Absolutely. I think it's really easy to forget when you're a language researcher and you think about language all the time and how important it is and how diverse it is and how exciting that is. But like normal people don't always see the value of either, they might not see why it's important to protect their minority language when it's like, I can speak English and that opens so many doors for me. And also kind of the reverse where you've got people who speak a majority language like English as their first language and they think, why should I care about whether there's technological support for, I don't know, like good technological support for Portuguese or whatever other language. So yeah, spreading that word, helping people understand the importance of linguistic diversity probably is one of the biggest roles that like any language researcher can play.
Yep, definitely.
Sharing the thing we care about with the world. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us, Jenny. Thank you online for listening. And please don't forget to engage with the podcast if you liked it. Like it, comment on it, share it with a friend, please. And you can also listen to the full back catalogue of PPLS Perspectives episodes wherever you usually listen to your podcasts. And just for a second plug, if you liked this one, you may also like the episode where I speak with Kenny Smith about the research that we do in the Centre for Language Evolution more generally. So please do listen to that one or any of the other ones that take your fancy. That's all from us. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Hello, producer Joe here. If you enjoyed this episode, why not subscribe? We publish a new episode every month from October through to May. You can also find all of our previous episodes available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts and YouTube.